Now that we've covered the nuts and bolts of the lesson, we can kind of mold that into what we want to have happen. Now, when we talk about learning goals, they are not the things that we're going to do in class. They're not our instructional plans, the activities, or how we're going to get them there. It's just what we want to have happen and be in their heads at the end. And so when we talk about lesson goals in this class, it is all about the change in the minds of our students. And so I typically like to phrase them as students will be able to do something. So after going through this 50-minute lesson, students should be able to explain how the Columbian Exchange was established and the impact it had on the world. That's the one-sentence version of it. Now the big question and where it gets, trickier is, well, what do I mean by that? I want them to understand this at a comprehension level. And so I want some knowledge network to be created. When we look at the first goal, one of the first things I want to do is make sure they remember why this happened in the first place. And Columbus promised these three different things to the king and queen of Spain at this time. One, you'll get richer. Two, you can expand your empire. And three, you can get more converts to Catholicism. Those are the big three selling points he had, and that's why it happened. Now, in this case, we could make that a comprehension goal, that you want to understand why they were funded. But in this case, I just want them to remember it, and remember it as another example of why all these things happened, because this keeps happening over and over and over again. There's lots of lessons that we could take away from all this stuff, but these are the ones we're going to focus on. Goal B, then, this is the bigger one. Students will be able to explain the impact it had on the world. First, and again, this is now, I have to think about, well, what does it mean to understand that, and what does that knowledge network look like? One, more exploration by European countries. They focus on Portugal and Spain here, but other people got involved, as you know. Two, greater conflict between Spain and Portugal. There was almost a war, and they had to have a treaty, mentioned down below, to say, manufactured by the Pope, because both rulers were Catholic at the time, about, well, this is how it's going to be. And so they deferred to a higher party, and then they kind of negotiated and compromised on what that would be, but it caused things to become a little more tense. Three, this led to the establishment of the slave trade. They mentioned that at the end of the lesson. Four, the diseases caused by European germs killed millions of natives and tens and hundreds of millions by some estimates, wiping out entire civilizations. They kind of whitewash it a bit in the text, but it was a big deal. And then five, Catholicism became a large part of Central and Southern American culture. From all the colonization of Portugal and Spain, you have the spread of this particular culture that was kind of forced onto the people. And so when we say, well, what was the impact? They should be able to tell you about these things. There are other things I want them to be able to recall. The historical significance of Christopher Columbus, Amerigo Vespucci, and Ferdinand Magellan was, right? And in each case, I just kind of sketched out, well, what do I want them to remember? Because if I don't do that, I'm not going to get it right. I'm not going to teach it right, and my assessments aren't going to be right. The Treaty of Tordesillas, that compromise between Portugal and Spain about where they can claim the new land. Circumnavigation, I should understand because of Magellan to even kind of understand or be able to make sense of the Ferdinand Magellan accomplishment. What circumnavigation is just sailing around the world. And then I want them to have this term Columbian Exchange there at a recall level. And it kind of gets into a comprehension level, but we're just going to keep it at a recall level for our instruction and our assessment. So these are the goals that I'm going to want you to modify your assessments to meet. There are some other considerations as well, and this is the first content validity thing. First, we have these different assessment strategies and rules, and so we need to make sure that we follow recall protocols for recall goals and comprehension protocols for comprehension goals. We also have construct validity. And that is where I want you to really think about, well, what are the constructs that are needed? Right now, you need to be able to read and you need to be able to write. Those are the two main things that we're doing here. Um, Prior knowledge is always a third construct that we care about, and we don't want to measure that if we don't have to. What I mean by that is I don't want to use vocabulary terms or give examples of things that students don't understand. I don't want to use formats of assessment that they might not have seen before. So I have to make sure that I address those issues. So think about, how are you going to minimize reading ability on somebody's ability to express that they understand this stuff? How are you going to minimize writing ability? So if students aren't good at writing, that doesn't cause problems. And then finally, prior knowledge. So think about those things as you go through it. We will go into reliability and bias in the future, but right now we're just focusing on where does validity show up. And we're focusing on these two concepts of content validity, meaning everything that's there is there and nothing's missing and nothing is extra, and at the right level of cognition. Construct validity is all about making sure that other knowledge, skills, and abilities that I don't really care about don't get in the way. So, good luck.